pressed play on that tape recorder, and David Parker Ray's voice filled the room. "You're going to be kept naked and chained. You will learn to do exactly what I want, when I want. I'm the FBI agent who discovered what was inside that trailer in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. And what I found there, it wasn't just evidence of torture. It was a blueprint for disappearing human beings. My name is Rachel Martinez. I've been with the FBI for 23 years now, specializing in crimes against persons, kidnapping, sexual assault, human trafficking. I thought I'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. Then I got the call about Truth or Consequences. It was March 22nd, 1999. A woman had escaped from a trailer on Bass Road, running naked down the highway with a metal collar still locked around her neck. Local police found her disoriented, injured, covered in bruises. She was saying things that seemed impossible. A torture chamber, days of captivity, a man named David. The Elephant Butte Police Department called us in within hours. They knew this was bigger than they could handle. When I arrived in that small New Mexico town, population barely 5,000, I remember thinking it looked like anywhere else in America. Quiet streets, modest homes, that endless desert sky. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors, where nothing bad was supposed to happen. The trailer was on a dead-end road, surrounded by empty land. From the outside, it looked ordinary. 40 feet long, white with brown trim. There was a house nearby where Ray lived, and this separate trailer set back from the road. The victim, I'll call her Cynthia, though that's not her real name, had given us enough details for a warrant. She described things no one could fabricate. Specific restraints, equipment, the layout inside. Sheriff's deputies had already secured the property. David Parker Ray was in custody, sitting calm as Sunday morning in an interview room. His girlfriend, Cindy Hendy, had been arrested too. But none of us were prepared for what was inside that trailer. I remember my hand on the door handle. My partner, Agent Michael Torres, stood beside me. We'd worked together for 6 years. We'd processed crime scenes in basements, hotel rooms, shallow graves. This was different. I opened the door, and the smell hit me first. Chemical cleaner, trying to mask something organic underneath. The temperature was controlled, air conditioning humming in the New Mexico heat. Then I saw it. The interior had been completely gutted and rebuilt. Soundproofing covered every wall. In the center of the room was a gynecological-style chair, heavily modified with restraints at every possible point. Pulleys hung from reinforced ceiling beams. There were cameras mounted in corners, surgical lighting, and everywhere, instruments. Whips, clamps, electrical devices, speculums, things I couldn't immediately identify. All labeled, organized, maintained. Like a workshop, like someone's hobby room. But it was the video camera that made my blood run cold. It was positioned directly facing that chair, connected to a TV and VCR setup. A recording system. Professional grade. Jesus Christ, Michael whispered beside me. We'd later learn Ray called this place his toy box. A name that made something so horrific sound almost innocent. I forced myself to move deeper into the trailer. Evidence bags ready, camera out, documenting everything. This is what we're trained to do: compartmentalize, observe, record. Feel it later. On a shelf, I found cassette tapes. Dozens of them. Some labeled with women's names. Some labeled with dates. Some labeled orientation tape. I picked up the one marked orientation. "We should bag this," Michael said. "We will," I replied. "But I need to know what we're dealing with." I found a tape player in the evidence kit we'd brought. Put on gloves. Loaded the tape with hands that I forced to stay steady. Press play. David Parker Ray's voice came through clear and unhurried. "Hello there, bitch. This tape is going to tell you what I am going to do to you." I listened to that entire tape. 17 minutes. Michael listened too. We stood there in that trailer while Ray's voice described, in methodical detail, what he did to the women he brought there. It wasn't ranting. It wasn't emotional. It was instructional. A list of rules. A breakdown of what would happen. An explanation of why screaming wouldn't help. Nobody could hear you. This place was soundproofed. You were miles from anywhere. He explained he would keep them as sex slaves. He described specific acts. He told them they'd be drugged, so they wouldn't remember clearly. He said when he was done with them, they would be released, but warned that if they went to police, no one would believe them because the drugs would make their memories fragmentary and confused. The tape ended with, "So, hang loose, bitch. You're here for the duration." I ejected the tape with shaking hands. "We need the whole team here," I said quietly. "Everyone. Now." Over the next 72 hours, we processed that trailer like an archaeological dig. Every surface, every corner, every hidden compartment. What we found told a story that was somehow worse than Cynthia's testimony, because it suggested this wasn't new. This wasn't his first victim. David Parker Ray was 60 years old. He'd lived in truth or consequences for decades, working as a mechanic for the State Parks Department. He'd been married and divorced multiple times. He had a daughter, a grandson. By all accounts, he was quiet, kept to himself, maybe a little odd but harmless. Except none of that was true. We found journals, detailed journals. Ray had been fantasizing about kidnapping and torturing women since he was a teenager. He'd spent decades planning this. The trailer, which he'd built himself over several years, was the culmination of those plans. He designed it specifically for this purpose. The soundproofing was professional grade. The restraints were custom-made. The chair had been modified with parts he'd machined himself. Every detail had been considered. "This is someone who understood engineering," our forensic specialist noted. "Look at these anchor points. They're designed to hold against significant force." He calculated weight loads, stress points. This isn't improvisation. We found diagrams, blueprints for devices. Ray had sketched out torture instruments and then built them. He'd planned camera angles for maximum viewing. He'd researched drugs and their effects on memory. And then we found the videos. Dozens of videotapes. Hours and hours of footage. I made myself watch them. Not all at once. Nobody could do that. But over weeks, in sessions where I'd watch until I couldn't anymore, then return the next day. They showed women in various states of consciousness, restrained in that chair or suspended from the ceiling. Ray himself appeared in many of them, along with Cindy Hendy and sometimes other accomplices. The women were subjected to. I can't detail it all. The cruelty was systematic, prolonged. But here's what haunted me. We couldn't identify most of the women. Cynthia we knew. One other victim came forward after news of the arrest spread. A woman named Angelica, who'd escaped years earlier, but hadn't been believed when she reported it. But the videos showed at least 7 different women. Different ages, different ethnicities. Some seemed drugged and confused. Some were crying. Some appeared catatonic. Who were they? Ray's journals mentioned packages, his term for victims. He documented abductions going back to the 1950s, though we couldn't verify the earliest ones. But there were entries with dates, physical descriptions, notes on where he'd grabbed them. Picked up hitchhiker near Socorro. One entry read, "Young, maybe 19 to 20. Kept for 3 days. Minimal resistance after first session. Released near Albuquerque with standard cocktail." The standard cocktail was a combination of drugs designed to create memory loss and confusion. Benzodiazepines, hallucinogens, sometimes sodium pentothal. Ray had researched extensively how to make his victims forget. And it had worked. We started pulling missing persons reports. Michael told me during week 2. Cross-referencing with Ray's suspected activity periods. In New Mexico alone, we've got 43 women who went missing between 1985 and 1999 who fit potential victim profiles. 43, I repeated. That's just New Mexico. He traveled for work. Arizona, Texas, Colorado. If we expand the search, he didn't finish. He didn't have to. We brought in cadaver dogs to search Ray's property and surrounding desert. They alerted on several locations. We dug, found bone fragments, 2 degraded for DNA testing with 1999 technology. Animal bones? Human bones? We couldn't be certain. But there was something else. Something that made even the veterans on our team go quiet. In a locked cabinet in Ray's house, we found photographs. Polaroids. Dozens of them. Women unconscious or semi-conscious in various positions. Some we could match to the videos. Others we couldn't. And on the back of each photo, Ray had written notes in small, neat handwriting. Number 14 kept 3 days, released ABQ no issues. Number 22 problematic, extended stay required, resolved. What did resolve mean? We interviewed Ray 16 times. I was in the room for 11 of those sessions. He was polite, cooperative even. He answered questions readily about the trailer, the equipment, the planning. He seemed almost proud of his craftsmanship. But when we asked about specific victims, about the women in the photos and videos we couldn't identify, he'd smile and say, "I don't recall." "You kept detailed journals," I pointed out. "You documented everything." "Memory's not what it used to be," he'd reply. It was a game to him. He knew we needed bodies, witnesses, proof. Without that, we could only charge him with the crimes against Cynthia and Angelica, the 2 victims we could definitively link to him. "You wrote that you've had over 50 victims," I said during our 8th interview, referencing his journals. He shrugged. "I was fantasizing, writing stories. These aren't stories. We have the videos, David. We have the women." "Then charge me," he said calmly. The problem was we couldn't find them. The women in the videos, the ones who weren't Cynthia or Angelica, they'd vanished into America. Maybe they were alive somewhere, drugged memories making them doubt what happened. Maybe they'd reported it and hadn't been believed, written off as confused or mentally unstable. Or maybe they were buried in that vast New Mexico desert, and we'd never find them. David Parker Ray's trial began in March 2000, exactly 1 year after Cynthia's escape. I testified for 2 days, walked the jury through the evidence, the trailer, the systematic nature of the crimes. I watched their faces as they tried to comprehend what they were seeing. Ray sat at the defense table, wearing glasses and a cardigan, looking like somebody's grandfather. The disconnect between his appearance and his actions was jarring. Cindy Hendy took a plea deal and testified against him. She described her role in luring women. She'd pose as a stranded motorist, offer rides, slip drugs into drinks at bars. She described what happened in the trailer, corroborating everything we'd found. But even with her testimony, even with Cynthia's powerful account, we could only prove charges related to 2 victims. The others remained ghosts. The trial lasted 3 months. Ray was convicted on 12 counts. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for later that year. But during the investigation, something happened that I've never spoken about publicly. Something that still doesn't sit right. We had brought in a forensic psychologist, Dr. Sarah Chun, to help profile Ray and potentially identify other victims based on his behavioral patterns. She interviewed him extensively. During one session, I was observing through closed-circuit video. Ray said something that made me freeze. Dr. Chun had asked about his earliest memories of these urges. Ray went quiet for a long moment, then spoke. "There was a girl," he said slowly. "I was 15. Her name was Maggie. We went to school together. She disappeared one summer, and everyone thought she'd run away. Everyone searched for weeks. What about her?" Dr. Chun asked. Ray smiled. "I just remembered her, that's all. Strange what comes back to you after all these years." I ran the name immediately. Margaret Maggie Connors. Disappeared July 1956 from Truth or Consequences. 15 years old. Never found. David Parker Ray would have been 15 that summer. I brought it up in our next interview. "Did you know Maggie Connors?" I asked directly. "I knew lots of people," he said. "Small town. Did you have anything to do with her disappearance?" He looked at me with those flat eyes. "Agent Martinez, that was 43 years ago. I was a child. Are you really suggesting I've been doing this for over 4 decades? The thing is, I couldn't prove he hadn't been. His journals referenced early experiments but were vague on dates. The trailer was built in the 1990s, but that didn't mean it was his first. He'd been married multiple times, lived in different places. Who knew what he'd done before he built his perfect torture chamber? We dug deeper into cold cases. Missing women from every place Ray had ever lived. The list grew and grew, but we couldn't prove anything. Not definitively. Then, in May 2002, before sentencing could be carried out, David Parker Ray had a heart attack in custody. He died, just like that, 62 years old. Gone. And with him went the answers to dozens, maybe hundreds of questions. Who were the women in those videos? Where were the bodies? How many victims were there really? We'd never know. After his death, I spent another 6 months working the case, following leads, interviewing potential witnesses, searching through his remaining possessions. We found more journals in a storage unit he'd rented under a false name. These were older, from the 1970s and 80s. They described abductions, assaults, disposal methods. But they were written almost like fiction. Was he documenting real crimes or elaborate fantasies? We couldn't tell. There was one entry that stayed with me, dated 1983. She was from California, passing through. Nobody local who'd be missed. 3 days in the basement before I got bored. Weighted her down in Caballo Lake. Depth sufficient. No concerns. We searched Caballo Lake. Brought in sonar, divers, spent thousands of dollars. Found nothing conclusive. That was the frustration. Everything with Ray was almost provable, almost certain, but never quite definite enough. Except for one thing. The last time I visited the evidence locker where we kept materials from the case, I went through the photographs again. Those Polaroids with notes on the back. And I realized something. The numbering wasn't consecutive. We had photos labeled number 14, number 22, number 37, number 41. But there were gaps. Large gaps. Where were the others? I checked the inventory. Every item removed from Ray's property, his house, his storage units, all accounted for. But those missing numbers. Either Ray had destroyed those specific photos, or he'd hidden them somewhere we never found, which meant there were victims we didn't even know existed. Women who'd never been photographed in that trailer, or whose photos had been kept somewhere else. Ray had been smart enough to document his crimes, but also smart enough to keep insurance. Hidden evidence that might never surface. I think about that sometimes. About boxes buried in the desert, or tucked in storage units under names we never traced, or hidden in walls of buildings that no longer exist. Evidence of women whose families are still waiting for them to come home. I left the FBI in 2004. Officially, I retired early due to accumulated stress. Unofficially, I couldn't do it anymore. The Ray case broke something in me. Not just because of what he did, though that was horrific enough, but because of what we couldn't prove. The women we couldn't save. The families we couldn't give closure to. I think about Cynthia often. She survived. She testified. She was incredibly brave. But she has to live with the knowledge that she was one of the lucky ones. That there were others before her who weren't so lucky. That Ray told her, on that orientation tape, that she wasn't the first and wouldn't be the last. She has to live knowing that if she hadn't escaped, if that chain had held, if Cindy Hendy had been watching more carefully, she might have become another missing person statistic. Another photo with a number on the back. I've stayed in touch with some of the investigators who are still working cold cases in New Mexico. They call me sometimes when something turns up. A bone fragment in the desert. An old missing persons report that might connect. A witness who remembers something from 20 years ago. We keep looking, but Ray's been dead for over 20 years now. The trailer was destroyed after the trial. Burned. Some evidence preserved. But the structure itself reduced to ash and metal. Nobody wanted it to become some sick tourist attraction. But I can still see it perfectly. Every detail, every device, every stain on that floor. I dream about it sometimes. In the dreams, I'm back in that trailer, but this time I can hear voices. Women calling for help. I search for them, but I can't find them. The trailer gets bigger and bigger, rooms leading to more rooms, and the voices get louder, but I can never reach them. I wake up with their voices still in my ears. My therapist says I carry survivor's guilt, even though I wasn't one of Ray's victims. Guilt that I couldn't save them all. That some of them are still missing. She's probably right. But there's something else too. Something I've never told anyone. During one of those last interviews with Ray, after he'd been convicted but before sentencing, I asked him a question off the record. The camera was off. My recorder was off. It was just the two of us in that room. Why did you do it? I asked. Not the psychology or the profile answers. The real reason. Why? He looked at me for a long time. Then he said something I'll never forget. Because I could. Because I figured out how to get away with it. And once you realize you can do something impossible, how do you stop? How do you just go back to being normal? But you got caught, I pointed out. He smiled. Did I? You've got 2 victims you can prove. 2 out of, well, you do the math, Agent Martinez. You're good at that. Look at the evidence, the timeline, the gaps in my whereabouts. Add it up. Tell me, I said. Give these families peace. Peace is overrated, he replied. They'll never know. That's part of it. That's part of what makes it perfect. I'll die, and all those questions will die with me. And you'll spend the rest of your life wondering. He was right about that. 3 months later, he had his heart attack. Died in a holding cell. Final act of control, denying us everything. It's been 25 years since I opened the door to the toy box. The FBI officially estimates David Parker Ray had between 40 and 60 victims. But that's a guess. An educated guess based on his journals, his suspected timeline, the capacity of his operation. The truth? We'll never know. Only 2 victims have ever been definitively confirmed and received any justice. Cynthia and Angelica. 2 women out of possibly dozens. The rest are shadows. Faces in degraded videos we couldn't identify. Numbers on photographs we never found. Names in journals that might have been fantasy or might have been real. Families across the Southwest are still waiting. Daughters who vanished in the 1980s. Sisters who went missing in the 90s. Women who were hitchhiking or working as prostitutes or just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some of them might be out there living with fragmentary memories of something terrible they can't quite recall. Trauma they can't explain. Scars they don't remember getting. Others are probably in that desert somewhere. In Caballo Lake or Elephant Butte, or buried in locations only Ray knew. We're still looking. Cold case investigators are still following leads. New technology for DNA testing gives us hope that some of those bone fragments might eventually tell their stories. But David Parker Ray took his secrets to the grave. I'm 61 now, retired. I live in Colorado, far from New Mexico. I consult occasionally on cases, but mostly I try to live a quiet life. But I never forgot those voices in my dreams, those missing women. And sometimes late at night, I think about what Ray said, about doing the math. He operated for decades. He was methodical, patient, intelligent. He built that trailer to be soundproof, to be perfect, to allow him to keep victims for days or weeks at a time. If he'd really been doing this since the 1950s, if those early journal entries weren't fantasy, how many people could one man disappear over 40 years? The answer is, more than we want to imagine. This is what keeps me up at night. Not just David Parker Ray, but the knowledge of how easy it was for him, how long he operated undetected, how many victims he might have claimed, and the terrible question that follows. If he did it, how many others are doing it right now? How many soundproofed rooms exist in America that we don't know about? How many missing persons reports are actually victims of predators who've learned to be patient, to be careful, to leave no trace? We caught Ray because he got careless, because Cynthia escaped, because he finally made a mistake after decades of not making mistakes. But what about the ones who don't get careless? My name is Rachel Martinez. I spent 3 years investigating the Toy Box Killer. And the worst part isn't what we found. It's what we didn't find. Somewhere in the New Mexico desert, under the endless sky and the silent earth, people are still waiting to be brought home. And they might be waiting forever. David Parker Ray died in 2002. The FBI believes he had between 40 to 60 victims. Only 2 have been confirmed. If you have any information about missing persons in New Mexico, Arizona, or Texas between 1960 to 1999, please contact the FBI.